Welcome back to Newsmaker. We are a day away from Super Bowl 60. We thought it would be a great time to bring in a veteran sports writer who has pretty much seen it all in the world of professional football. Howard Balzer has written for the Sporting News, Pro Football Weekly. He's been an analyst for ESPN, covered 45 Super Bowls. He's done it all. It's great to have Howard Balzer on the program. Good to see you.
John, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me as part of this great show.
Yes, thank you very much, Howard. You covered the Cardinals for years. You've covered that franchise probably more than any other, right?
Well, actually, I covered the Rams more once the Cardinals left St. Louis. I was in St. Louis for over 40 years. And so I did cover the Cardinals then when I moved to St. Louis. Then when they moved to the desert, there was a period of time where St. Louis didn't have a team. And then the Rams moved there. So I covered them for around 20 years until they moved back to L.A. And then came here 5 years ago to begin covering the Cardinals again. So
exactly.
Yeah, but I've been there for a bunch of years here and then. And Bill Bidwell, of course, was the owner then. Now it's Michael Bidwell, and so I've experienced a certain amount with this franchise.
So do cultures of ownership win championships? I'm thinking of the two teams in the Super Bowl this year. And obviously Kraft has had an unbelievable run. Is it the culture of the ownership that wins championships?
I believe it's a big part of it. Obviously, there's so many things that go into winning. But it does start at, there's that old saying in anything, in business, it starts at the top. And I think that's a question about the Cardinals organization. It's out there. And I think there's the perception. I mean, we see it with coaching searches when certain guys, well, don't know if I want to go there. But you look at other organizations like the Steelers. You mentioned the teams in the Super Bowl. They have that record and that history of running things in a stable manner.
49ers,
yeah, another one. And so, yes, I do. I don't know if the ownership wins or the organization, well, the whole organization wins, but there's no question I believe that it starts at the top for any franchise to be successful.
It seems that with pro football, NFL, it is king. I mean, we talk about the national pastime being baseball. It's football.
It definitely is. And I'll go back. You mentioned the Sporting News. I started there in 1978, and they were known as the Baseball Bible. Right? They were the Baseball Bible. And they had a little bit of NFL coverage, but it really wasn't substantial. And I remember a day I walked up to the managing editor after I'd been there for a couple of years. I said, I think we should be doing more on the NFL. This was around 1980, then 79. And, just do more coverage, especially in the off season where people don't know what's going on. There was no internet back then. And I remember this day like it was yesterday. He says, well, that's a pretty good idea. We could devote a page to the NFL in the off season. And he says, who do you think we could get to do that? Most of the time, we employed writers from different papers around the country to do those kinds of things. So I was a young, not so brash, but I got a little bold, and I said, well, I could do it. And he said, okay.
And the rest is history.
Yeah,
and by
the rest
the way,
is history.
That's 79, 80. You punch your ticket to your first Super Bowl.
Yes.
Raiders,
Eagles.
And the Eagles. Kenny King, Plunkett, unbelievable team.
First season.
Herm Edwards on the other side with the Eagles.
Totally. And so, that was my first one. And the other part about it was being there is that when I get the call, when ESPN is televising their first draft in 1980, and Pete Rozelle made the famous quote when ESPN approached them. They had just gone on the air in the fall of 79.
Right.
They said, we're interested in televising the NFL draft. And Pete Rozelle said, well, why in the world would you want to do that? Who would watch that?
Now it's a spectacle.
Yeah, now it's a spectacle. And so...
Where was it held, Howard?
Well, it was always in New York.
Was it at the Plaza, or where did they have it?
Well, they had it at the Marriott Marquis sometimes. It was at the Hilton, different hotels.
Okay.
At one point, it was at Radio City Music Hall.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is when they started moving it around, when all of a sudden they realized that the draft was scheduled as the same time as Easter week, when Radio City Music Hall had their big Easter spectacle. And they couldn't do the draft there. So they had to switch it to somewhere else quickly in New York City. And after that, and said, well, let's look at something else. And the next year they went to Chicago, and the rest of that is history.
So they started moving it around.
So real quick, in 1980, I get a call from ESPN saying, can we use your mock draft on our show, on the draft show. And I said, well, that might be a little tough because we do it early. We're a weekly publication. Things will change, and then after a while, you won't be able to use it. And I said, but I'm doing some local radio in St. Louis. If you want to come to me every now and then to come on and give my opinion, what's happened, what might happen next, you might. He says, well, it's not a bad thought. We'll get back to you. I get a call back the next day. They say, how do you like to come to Bristol and be on the show?
There you go.
And that was really it. I did that for the first 9 years of their draft telecast.
Do you remember the draft that actually put the draft on the map? Was there a player coming out that when they came out, it really changed everything? Would it have been Elway? I don't know. Who would it have been?
Well, yeah, that's a good. It's 1983,
right?
The year of the quarterback.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only that Elway was in it, but there was all these rumors where he's going to go.
And he didn't want to go to Baltimore.
Didn't want to go to Baltimore.
Yes.
And then there was all the rumors about where he's going to be. Heck, they made a documentary of that.
Yeah.
One of the ESPN, deals. 30 by 30 for 30. And people every year I get a call. Hey, I saw you on ESPN, because every once in a while they rerun that, and they run a couple of clips, from it with him and Marino and Jim Kelly, and it was just an amazing draft. So that was really one. Yes.
That's not the quarterback draft we've got this year. It's pretty thin.
No, it is thin. There's always guys, I believe, that will help teams, but you just have to be smart about it. But we also know, John, that teams, I always say, I'd hate to be a general manager of a team that's picking high in the draft and need a quarterback, because then you feel we have to get one.
Who do you like in Super Bowl 60? I mean, the Seahawks look like a juggernaut.
It's almost difficult to pick against the Seahawks, but on the other hand, you say this has been a magical season for the Patriots, a team that won 4 games last year, hired Mike Vrabel as coach, and he's put his culture and stamp on this team. But the Seahawks are just so good right now. They're on a roll, and they have a great defense. Of course, they gave up a bunch of points and yards to the Rams in the NFC Championship game.
That's the Rams, though.
Right. That is the Rams. You're 100% right about that.
Yeah.
And so it was always interesting how Stan Kroenke and the Rams, they got real good when they went to L.A., because all of a sudden he said, you know what, we can't be 7-9 here because no one will come to the games.
That is very true.
Very true.
Having grown up there in California, that's right. When you look at the state of the NFL right now, how has the game changed? Obviously, they're protecting the quarterback a lot more. They seem to want to promote offensive play. But still, the scores are remarkably low. There's a lot more offense in college football. How has the game changed?
Well, there is, but you still get a pretty good number of games with 30 points. But I think that one of the things that hurts the NFL, one of the things they changed is in terms of, I remember when Dick Vermeil came to the Rams as head coach. He almost had a mutiny among players because he was having 3-a-days, not 2-a-days. He had 3-a-days in training camp. Well, now, after the collective bargaining agreement, I guess in 2011, and they've limited it since then, they limit the amount of contact, they limit the amount of padded practices that you have. And so I think a lot of times, John, teams enter the season, a lot of times they're really not ready to play quote, tackle football. And so you see some sloppiness early. It helped teams get slow starts. But the one thing that's changed a lot, I think, is the lack of patience that there is with organizations with head coaches. And they don't realize every time you change a coach after 2 or 3 years, now you're changing the schemes, and everybody has to learn new ones.
And the entire staff usually.
And then the staff usually. I looked at a number last year. I think last year there were 7 or 8 head coaching changes. There were also a total of 16 teams that started the season with an offensive coordinator different than they had the year before.
That is so tough on quarterbacks.
Totally. It's tough on everybody. And then you get into the regular season, and if you get off to a slow start, it's tough to come back from that because there's so few games.
Do you think they can? There's talk about going to 17 regular season games.
Or 18. Yeah. They're going to do it. I don't think there's any doubt they're going to do it.
I did a tweet the other day. I said, I think we're at the end of the rainbow. And the reason I said that is because you're losing quality players at the end of the year.
Right.
I just think there's too much mileage on it.
There totally is. And the players are against it, but they were against going to 17. And then they had some things that they gave the players. And one of the things was less contact, shorter off-season programs, all those things. But it's also less time getting ready for the season.
Exactly.
And so, and they're talking about having an international, every team will have an international game. I mean, when you think about it, and players will say this all the time, when you're playing on Thursday, and granted, you don't have that many games on Thursday, these players don't even feel human each week after a game on Sunday until Wednesday or Thursday. And now if you're on the road for a Thursday game, you're traveling on Wednesday for a game and expected to go out there and play great football. And it is a grind.
You remember Vi Sikahama?
Oh, yeah.
Great return guy for the Eagles. I talked to him. He was sitting in that chair, and I said, what do you feel like on Monday after game? He says, it feels like you've been in a bad car crash.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, okay, that's descriptive.
And the thing about it, the thing that confounds me a little bit is, like all season, this past season, we heard what a great job Kyle Shanahan did in San Francisco overcoming the injuries that they had. Well, he didn't overcome them the year before when Christian McCaffrey missed 13 games.
Right.
But everyone will say that. But then when you bring up how the Cardinals had the most missed games of any team in the NFL this past season, they ended the season with 26 players on injured reserve and a lot of really good players. But then when you bring that up, people say, well, you're just making excuses. So are you saying Gannon should have gotten another shot? I can understand why the reaction is, because everyone's saying he should be fired. But I believe with what the growth that they had shown, and that it's almost impossible to truly evaluate what a head coach has done when you're missing that many players. The second half of the season, John, they had weeks of practice where they did walkthroughs on Wednesday. The first day of practice, they had walkthroughs because they didn't have enough healthy players to go through a regular practice.
That's unbelievable.
And so that hurts a team. And everyone said, well, those are excuses. Those are excuses. Well, the Rams, for example, you know how many players they had on injury reserve going into their NFC Championship game? Three. Seattle, I think, has 6 or 7. So the healthiest team at the end. The healthiest teams are the ones that are usually standing at the end.
We got a couple of seconds left. Do you have a pick for the Super Bowl?
I like the Seahawks.
You do?
I really do. Certainly wouldn't surprise me if the Patriots pull off an upset.
Who's got the edge at quarterback?
Well, Sam Darnold is playing out of his mind.
He is playing really
Drake
well.
May banged up his shoulder a little bit in the AFC Championship game. It might not matter that much because he's pretty good, and he runs well, which Darnold doesn't do as much of. I mean, I think the difference in that game with the Patriots and the Broncos were the times he ran and made big plays. But I think that they're just a little short of the Seahawks, and Seattle probably win. But I still think it should be another close game, which we've had so many of all season and in the postseason.
Seeing you. It's great seeing
you, John.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Howard Balzer, legend covering NFL. We're back in a minute on Newsmaker. Thank you.